I knew something was wrong the moment I walked into the office that Friday morning. The atmosphere felt different, tense, like the air before a storm. My team avoided eye contact as I passed their desks, and hushed conversations quickly died when I approached. "Michael, can I see you in my office?" Derek's voice carried across the open floor plan, dripping with false pleasantry. Derek Hamilton, our new CEO of 6 months, stood in his doorway in an impeccably tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. At 35, he was nearly 20 years my junior, brought in by the board to modernize Summit Technologies. I followed him into his corner office, the same office where I'd spent countless late nights with Tom, the previous CEO, debugging code and building the software that had transformed Summit from a struggling startup into a $200 million company. Now those memories seemed to mock me from the sleek, modernized walls Derek had installed. "Take a seat." Derek gestured to one of his minimalist chairs, then settled behind his massive desk. "Michael, we need to talk about your role here at Summit." I sat quietly, already knowing where this was heading. I'd seen the signs over the past few months, the gradual exclusion from strategic meetings, the younger developers being assigned to review my code, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. "The industry is changing rapidly," Derek began, his rehearsed speech flowing smoothly. "We need to ensure Summit stays competitive in this new landscape. That means embracing new methodologies, fresh perspectives." He paused, probably for dramatic effect. "Younger talent." The last 2 words hung in the air between us. I couldn't help but smile slightly, which seemed to throw him off balance. "I've been here 15 years, I said calmly. "I built CoreLogic from scratch. It generates 80% of our revenue." Derek waved his hand dismissively. "Yes, and we appreciate your historical contributions. But CoreLogic needs modernization. Your methods are outdated. We're bringing in a team of young developers who understand current technologies, machine learning, cloud architecture, agile methodologies." I almost laughed. I'd been implementing machine learning algorithms while Derek was still in college. The outdated CoreLogic system processed millions of transactions daily for some of the biggest names in finance. But arguing would be pointless. "When?" I asked simply. "Today will be your last day. HR has prepared a generous severance package." He slid a folder across the desk. "We'll need your keycard and laptop before you leave. Standard protocol." I took the folder without opening it. "And the transition plan for CoreLogic. The system requires specific maintenance protocols." Derek's smile turned condescending. "We have complete documentation, and the new team is more than capable of handling any legacy systems. We're planning a complete overhaul anyway." Now I did laugh, just a small chuckle. Derek's eyes narrowed. "Something amusing, Michael?" "No, not at all," I replied, standing up. "I wish you and the new team the best of luck. You're going to need it." "Is that a threat?" Derek's voice hardened. "Not at all. Just an observation." I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Derek, you might want to review my original contract with Tom. Specifically, the IP rights section. Could be interesting reading." I walked out before he could respond, leaving him with a slightly puzzled expression that would soon turn to panic when he realized what I meant. Back at my desk, I began methodically packing my personal items into a cardboard box. My team watched nervously from their cubicles, but only Sarah, my longest-serving developer, dared to approach. "Michael?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Is it true?" I nodded, giving her a reassuring smile. "It's time for fresh perspectives, apparently. I'm too outdated for the new vision." Sarah's face flushed with anger. "That's ridiculous. CoreLogic is your creation. Nobody knows it like you do. The documentation isn't even complete. There are sections only you understand." "I know," I said quietly, placing my coffee mug in the box. "But that's not my problem anymore." "What are they thinking? The system maintenance cycle is due next week. The quarterly security protocols need updating. There are client customizations that only you know how to implement." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Sarah, you're an excellent developer. You'll figure it out. Or not. Either way, it's out of my hands now." As if on cue, my email access was cut off. Standard protocol indeed. I hadn't expected anything less. But it didn't matter. Everything important was already secured. What Derek didn't know, what Tom had deliberately kept off the books, was that I owned the core intellectual property rights to the software. It had been part of my original agreement when I joined Summit as their first developer. Tom had understood the value of what I was building and had agreed to my terms. I retained ownership of the base code, while Summit had a perpetual license to use and modify it, as long as I remained with the company. That agreement had been sealed with a simple handshake at first, then formalized in a contract that few people knew existed. Tom had kept it in a sealed envelope in his personal files, which had apparently been cleared out when Direct took over. I had my own copy, of course, safely stored with my lawyer. The irony was almost painful. Derek thought he was modernizing the company by pushing out the outdated old guard. Instead, he had just invalidated the license agreement for the software that powered 80% of Summit's revenue. By Friday next week, when the quarterly security protocols needed updating, CoreLogic would stop processing transactions. The system wouldn't crash. I had built it too well for that. It would simply stop accepting new data, displaying a licensing verification error. I could already imagine the chaos that would ensue. Clients would be furious. The board would demand answers. Derek's young, talented team would scramble to understand the sophisticated architecture I had built over 15 years. And when they finally dug deep enough to find the licensing agreement, a security guard appeared at my desk, right on schedule. "Mr. Stevens, I'm here to escort you out." I nodded, picking up my box. As we walked toward the elevator, I caught glimpses of my team watching sadly. They were good people caught in the crossfire of corporate politics and ageist assumptions. I hoped they'd land on their feet when everything unraveled. The guard accompanied me to my car, watching as I placed the box in the trunk. As I opened the driver's door, my phone buzzed with a text from Tom, my old boss. "Just heard. Their mistake. Call me, might have an interesting proposition for you." I smiled, starting the engine. Yes, Monday would be very interesting indeed. The weekend passed slowly. I spent Saturday morning at my lawyer's office, reviewing the IP agreement and preparing for what would inevitably come. Barbara, my lawyer of 20 years, couldn't hide her amusement as she read through the contract. "This is beautiful," she said, adjusting her reading glasses. "The language is absolutely clear. You retain all intellectual property rights to the core software. Summit's license to use and modify is contingent upon your employment. No assignment clauses, no transfer of rights. Did they even review this before terminating you?" I shook my head. Derek's too young to know about it. Tom kept it quiet. He understood the value of keeping me happy. The board probably forgot it existed. "Well, they're about to get a very expensive reminder." Barbara set the contract aside. "What's your plan?" "Wait," I replied simply. "The system needs its quarterly security update next Friday. Without the proper protocols, it'll stop processing transactions. They'll try to bypass it, of course, but I built in hardware-level verification. Can't be overridden without the proper keys." "Which you control." "Which I control," I confirmed. "By Monday afternoon, they'll have thousands of angry clients and no way to fix it. That's when the real fun begins." Barbara leaned back in her chair. "They'll try to fight it, claim the agreement is invalid, probably allege you planted a time bomb in the software. Let them. The code is clean. Every security measure is documented and necessary for regulatory compliance. They can audit it all they want, and the agreement is ironclad, thanks to you." "What's your endgame here, Michael?" "Reinstatement." I laughed. "No, I have something better in mind. Tom's starting a new venture. He wants me to join as Chief Technology Officer, bringing CoreLogic with me. We'll offer Summit's clients a smooth transition to our new platform. At a premium, of course." Ruthlessly elegant, Barbara smiled. "Need me to draft the client agreements?" "Please, we'll want everything ready when the panic starts." The rest of the weekend I spent at home, ignoring the increasingly urgent emails from Summit that began arriving on Saturday evening. Apparently, someone had finally thought to review my contract. By Sunday night, the messages were coming from their legal team. I forwarded each one to Barbara without reading them. Instead, I focused on preparing for what was coming. I reviewed the documentation for the critical systems, making notes about potential bypass attempts their team might try. I knew they would spend the weekend attempting to understand the architecture, looking for ways around the security protocols. They wouldn't find any. I had built the system too carefully for that. As I worked, I thought about Derek's dismissive words. Outdated. Legacy systems. He had assumed that my age made me obsolete, never bothering to understand that the complexity of core logic wasn't a weakness. It was a carefully crafted fortress. Each outdated module was a deliberate choice, each legacy system a calculated decision based on years of experience. Monday morning arrived bright and clear. I took my time getting ready, enjoying a leisurely breakfast while imagining the chaos unfolding at Summit's offices. Around 10 a.m., my phone rang, a Summit number I didn't recognize. Let the games begin. I let the phone ring 3 times before answering, keeping my voice professionally neutral. Michael Stevens. Michael, this is James Wilson from Summit's legal department. We need to discuss your separation agreement and some concerning aspects of your employment contract that have recently come to light. I smiled, settling into my home office chair. Of course. Though I should mention that all legal matters should go through my attorney. I'll have her contact you. This is rather urgent, James pressed. There seemed to be some complications regarding the core logic system. Complications? I asked innocently. I'm sure Derek's new team of young, talented developers can handle any legacy system issues. There was a pause, then a sigh. Michael, please. We both know what's happening here. The quarterly security protocols need to be updated by Friday. Without them, the entire system will lock down. Yes, that's correct. It's a regulatory requirement, prevents unauthorized modifications, and ensures compliance with financial processing standards. I believe it's all thoroughly documented. Documentation doesn't help if we don't have the authentication keys, James said, frustration creeping into his voice. Look, I've reviewed your original contract with Thomas Bennett. While there appears to be some language regarding intellectual property rights, surely we can reach a reasonable arrangement. I'm always open to reasonable arrangements, I replied calmly. Though I'm quite busy with other opportunities at the moment. Perhaps if Direct had been interested in a transition plan before dismissing me as outdated. The line went quiet for a moment. When James spoke again, his voice was carefully measured. The board would like to meet with you, today, if possible. We need to resolve this situation quickly. I'm afraid today doesn't work for me. I have several meetings scheduled. A lie, but they didn't need to know that. I could potentially make time tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow might be too late. We have clients. Starting to ask questions, I finished for him. Yes, I imagine they are. Funny how quickly things change when you dismiss someone as irrelevant without understanding their value. Michael, please, we can make this right. Whatever you want, your position back, a raise, equity in the company. I'll have my attorney contact you about setting up a meeting, I said firmly. Good day, James. I hung up and leaned back, counting silently. 3, 2, 1. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Emergency all-hands meeting called. Derek looks like he's about to explode. The new team tried to bypass the security protocols all weekend. Nothing worked. I typed back. Hope they enjoy the experience. Good learning opportunity. Sarah, they're completely lost. No one understands how the core modules interact. Derek keeps promising we'll rebuild it from scratch, but clients are already calling about delayed transactions. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the news alerts I'd set up for Summit Technologies. Their stock had dropped 3% in morning trading, not dramatic yet, but enough to show that whispers were starting to spread. My phone rang again, this time displaying Derek's number. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, an email arrived from him. Michael, I believe we got off on the wrong foot Friday. In our drive to modernize Summit, I may have acted hastily regarding your position. I'd appreciate the opportunity to discuss this situation and find a mutually beneficial solution. The board has expressed interest in maintaining our existing infrastructure while we develop new systems. Your expertise would be valuable in this transition period. Please call me at your earliest convenience. Derek Hamilton, CEO, Summit Technologies. The desperation was palpable, but still tinged with that corporate arrogance, as if this was just a small misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with some carefully worded platitudes. I drafted a brief reply. Direct. Thank you for your email. As I mentioned to James, any discussions should go through my attorney. I'm sure you understand the need for proper legal representation given the circumstances. Regards, Michael Stevens. I was about to hit send when another text from Sarah arrived. You need to see this. Direct just told the dev team to try removing the security verification modules entirely. Said we can rebuild that part later. Pretty sure that violates about 6 regulatory requirements. I quickly added a postscript to my email. P.S. You might want to advise your team against removing the security verification modules. That would put Summit in violation of SEC Regulations 34.17 Ad 22-17I and several other compliance requirements. I'd hate to see the company face regulatory issues on top of everything else. Send. Let them stew on that for a while. By lunchtime, Summit's stock had dropped another 2%. A financial technology blog had picked up the story, running a piece titled "Trouble at Summit. Major fintech player faces system issues." The article was mostly speculation, but it mentioned delayed transactions and unnamed sources expressing concerns about the company's technical leadership. I made myself a sandwich and settled in to watch the chaos unfold. My phone continued to buzz with calls from Summit numbers I didn't recognize. Each one went to voicemail. Around 2 p.m., a more interesting call came in. Martin Chen, CEO of Summit's largest client. "Michael," he said when I answered. "Want to tell me what's going on at Summit? I've got millions in transactions stuck in pending status, and nobody over there seems to know how to fix it." "I'm not with Summit anymore," I replied. "They decided to go in a different direction last Friday. Something about needing younger talent." Martin's laugh was sharp and humorless. "You're kidding me. They fired the guy who built their entire system. Please tell me this is a joke." "I'm afraid not, though I'm sure their new team will figure things out eventually. They're very talented, from what I hear." "Eventually isn't good enough," Martin growled. "We process over 50 million in transactions daily through CoreLogic. I can't have eventually." I made a sympathetic noise. "I understand your concern. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about it now. Summit owns their implementation of the system." A careful choice of words, technically true but misleading. Their implementation. Martin caught the nuance immediately, but not the system itself. "I'm afraid I can't discuss the specifics of my arrangements with Summit," I said smoothly. "Though I should mention that I'm joining a new venture soon. One that might have some interesting solutions for companies in need of reliable transaction processing." There was a pause as Martin processed this. Would this venture happen to involve Tom Bennett? I smiled. Martin had always been sharp. "As I said, I can't discuss specifics at the moment, but if you'd like to have lunch later this week, I'm sure we could have an interesting conversation about the future of financial technology." "Tomorrow," Martin said firmly. "The Capitol Grill at noon. Don't be late." The rest of the afternoon brought increasingly frantic messages from Summit. The development team had apparently given up on bypassing the security protocols and was now trying to migrate client data to a new system, a process that would take weeks, even if they knew what they were doing. Sarah kept me updated on the internal chaos. Derek's on his third cup of coffee and it's not even 4 p.m. Board called an emergency session for tomorrow morning. Young, talented team looking a lot less confident now. I spent the evening preparing documentation for my meeting with Martin, diagrams showing how quickly we could migrate their transactions to our new platform, cost projections, compliance certifications. Tom had been busy the past few months, laying the groundwork for exactly this situation. Just before midnight, a final email arrived from Derek. "Michael, the board has called an emergency session for tomorrow at 9 a.m. Your presence is requested. Name your price, whatever it takes to resolve this situation. Please don't let this become something we all regret." Derek. I started composing a response, then decided to let him sweat through the night instead. Tomorrow would be soon enough to explain exactly how much they had already come to regret their decisions. I closed my laptop and headed to bed, sleeping soundly for the first time since Friday. Let them have their emergency board meeting. Let them realize the full extent of their mistake. Let Derek explain to the board how his drive for younger talent had just cost them their entire business model. Tomorrow would bring its own interesting developments. But for now, I had the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back. It's simply letting people face the consequences of their own arrogance. Tuesday morning dawned with Summit stock down another 5% in pre-market trading. Financial technology blogs had picked up more details overnight, with one running the headline, "Summit Technologies in Crisis. Key developer exit leads to system failures." I dressed carefully for the day ahead, choosing a crisp charcoal suit I hadn't worn since my last board presentation. The irony wasn't lost on me. After being dismissed as outdated, I was about to demonstrate just how valuable experience could be. At 8:45 a.m., I walked into Summit's lobby. The security guard did a double take. Clearly, no one had updated him on my visitor status. Before he could call for clarification, Barbara, my attorney, strode through the doors. "Good morning, Michael," she said crisply, then turned to the guard. "We're here for the board meeting. I believe we're expected." The guard checked his list, frowning. "I don't have." "Call Derek Hamilton," I suggested. "He's expecting us." A few minutes and several nervous phone calls later, we were escorted to the executive floor. The tension was palpable. Employees quickly looked away as we passed, and hushed conversations died mid-sentence. Derek met us outside the boardroom, his usual polished appearance showing signs of strain. His designer suit was slightly rumpled and dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Michael," he said, extending his hand. I looked at it until he awkwardly withdrew it. "Thank you for coming. We're eager to resolve this situation." "I'm sure you are," Barbara replied before I could speak. "Shall we?" The boardroom was packed. The full board sat around the massive mahogany table, along with James from legal and several senior executives. At the far end, I noticed Sarah and two other developers, presumably there to explain the technical situation. William Chen, the board chairman, spoke first. "Mr. Stevens, thank you for joining us. We find ourselves in a difficult situation." "So I've heard," I replied, taking a seat. Barbara arranged her documents beside me. "Our technical team has been unable to implement the required security protocols," William continued. "Without them, we face significant regulatory compliance issues. Additionally, several major clients have expressed concerns about transaction processing delays." Derek jumped in. "We're prepared to offer you a comprehensive compensation package. Full reinstatement, a significant equity stake, whatever it takes to resolve this immediately." Barbara smiled thinly. "My client is no longer interested in employment with Summit Technologies." The room went silent. "Then what do you want?" Derek demanded, his composure cracking. I leaned forward slightly. "I want you to understand exactly what your drive for younger talent has cost this company. The CoreLogic system isn't just software, it's 15 years of accumulated knowledge, careful design, and an intimate understanding of financial regulations. You couldn't see past my age to recognize that experience has value." "We acknowledge mistakes were made," William said carefully, "but surely we can find a solution that benefits everyone." I nodded to Barbara, who began distributing documents to the board members. "Page 1 is my original contract with Summit, specifically the intellectual property clauses," I explained. "As you can see, I retain ownership of the core system. Summit's license to use and modify it was contingent upon my continued employment." Derek's face reddened. "That's ridiculous. You developed it while working here." Using my pre-existing code base, I cut him off. "Tom understood its value. That's why he agreed to my terms. Something you might have discovered if you bothered to review the company's history before deciding to modernize everything." James, the lawyer, was scrutinizing the contract. "This appears legally binding," he admitted reluctantly. "Page 2, I continued, is a list of clients who have already reached out to discuss alternative arrangements. You'll notice Martin Chen's company at the top." William Chen's eyes narrowed. "What alternative arrangements?" "I'm joining New Horizon Financial Technologies as Chief Technology Officer," I announced. "We're preparing to launch a next-generation transaction processing platform, one that builds on everything I learned developing CoreLogic." The implications sank in slowly. Without a valid license for CoreLogic, Summit would lose its primary revenue source. Their clients, already frustrated by the system issues, would jump at the chance to move to a new platform, especially one developed by the person they trusted to handle their transactions. "This is blackmail," Derek sputtered. Barbara's voice cut through the room like ice. "This is consequences. My client offered to discuss transition plans. You chose to dismiss him instead, invalidating your license in the process. Everything happening now is the result of your decisions. The board needs to discuss this privately," William announced. "Mr. Stevens, would you and your attorney mind stepping out for a moment?" In the hallway, Barbara checked her watch. "I give them 10 minutes before they realize they have no options." She was wrong. It only took 7. When we returned to the boardroom, the atmosphere had shifted. Derek sat slumped in his chair, while William Chen took control of the discussion. "We've reviewed our position," he said gravely. What would it cost to maintain our license for CoreLogic while we transition to a new system? I shook my head. That's not on the table. The license terminated with my employment. Any new agreement would be between Summit and New Horizon at market rates. Which are? Barbara slid the final document across the table. William's eyes widened at the figures. This is highway robbery. This is business. I corrected him. You can either pay market rates for a proven system, or explain to your clients why you're switching them to an untested platform developed by your young, talented team. The room erupted in arguments. Board members shouted over each other. Derek tried to defend his decisions, and James frantically flipped through legal documents, looking for any loophole. Finally, William raised his hand for silence. We need time to consider our options. Of course, I said, standing. Take all the time you need. Though I should mention I'm having lunch with Martin Chen today to discuss New Horizons offerings. I'm sure other clients would be interested in hearing about it too. As Barbara and I walked out, I caught a glimpse of Derek being confronted by several board members. His fresh perspectives had just cost Summit millions, and from their expressions, they weren't feeling particularly appreciative of his modernization efforts. Sarah caught up with us at the elevator. Michael, she said quietly, is it true? You're starting fresh somewhere else. I smiled. New Horizon is always looking for experienced developers who understand the value of both innovation and stability. Send me your resume. The elevator doors closed on her hopeful expression, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying what others built. It's about building something better yourself. Lunch with Martin Chen proved even more productive than I'd anticipated. We met at the Capitol Grill, where a private booth and excellent wine helped facilitate a frank discussion about the future. You know, Martin said, swirling his glass thoughtfully, when I heard Summit was pushing you out, I couldn't believe it. The arrogance of thinking CoreLogic could run without you. I smiled. Derek wanted younger perspectives. He got them, along with regulatory compliance issues, system failures, and angry clients. Speaking of angry clients, Martin leaned forward. Tell me more about New Horizon. Tom Bennett's involved. As chairman, we're building something special, not just a transaction processing system, but a complete financial technology ecosystem. One that learns from every challenge CoreLogic faced. By dessert, Martin had verbally committed to being New Horizon's first major client. The contract would be worth twice what his company had been paying Summit. One condition, he said as we shook hands. I want you personally overseeing the migration. No offense to your young, talented team, he winked. None taken. Back in my home office, messages were piling up. Summit's stock had dropped another 8% after news broke about my meeting with Martin. Analysts were questioning the company's stability, and traders were betting heavily against its future. Sarah had sent her resume, along with a note. Derek's been locked in meetings with the board all afternoon. Rumor is they're discussing leadership changes. I wasn't surprised. In the corporate world, results matter more than promises, and Derek's modernization strategy had just cost them their biggest client. Around 4 p.m., William Chen called. The board has reviewed Summit's position, he said without preamble. We'd like to make a counterproposal. I'm listening. We want to acquire New Horizon. I nearly choked on my coffee. Excuse me? Full acquisition. Before you've even launched, name your price. I thought about it for a moment. The offer was tempting. It would mean an immediate payout rather than the longer road of building a new company. But it would also mean returning to Summit's corporate culture, dealing with the same politics and prejudices that had led to this situation. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but New Horizon isn't for sale. We're building something different, a company that values experience and innovation equally. William sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. You should know that Derek Hamilton has been asked to resign. The board feels his judgment was flawed. I wish him luck finding a position that better aligns with his vision for younger talent. That evening, Tom hosted a small dinner at his house to celebrate. Several key developers from Summit had already accepted positions with New Horizon, including Sarah. As we sat on his patio, watching the sunset, he raised his glass. To experience, he toasted, and to teaching some young, talented executives a valuable lesson. The next morning, Summit announced Derek's resignation, citing strategic differences with the board. Their stock stabilized, but the damage was done. Within a month, 3 more major clients signed contracts with New Horizon. I saw Derek one more time, About 6 months later, I was leaving a coffee shop when he walked in, looking notably less polished in an off-the-rack suit. He froze when he saw me, then quickly averted his eyes. Direct, I nodded politely. He mumbled something and hurried past. Through the window, I watched him take a seat and pull out his laptop, probably working on his resume, looking for another company to modernize. New Horizon grew rapidly, gaining a reputation for combining innovative technology with rock-solid reliability. We hired developers of all ages, judging them on their skills and dedication rather than their birth year. Sarah eventually became our head of development, proving that talent knows no age limit. Sometimes I think about that Friday when Derek fired me, believing he was modernizing Summit by pushing out the outdated old guard. He never understood that true innovation comes from building on experience, not discarding it. The best revenge wasn't destroying Summit or even taking their clients. It was building something better. Something that proved experience and innovation aren't mutually exclusive. And every time I walk into our offices, seeing teams of diverse ages working together, learning from each other, I know we succeeded. Experience, as it turns out, never goes out of style.